And there's another thing that
Yeah.
America are now doing, and Holland, on America's behalf, are
Yeah.
seizing the assets of organizations that have nothing to do with the Chinese government. They're saying China is playing hardball, so we're going to seize this private corporation's assets and re-own it. We're going to make it into a Dutch company when it's really going to backfire when they do this, because that company sends, and I'm talking about both dollars and products, billions to China, so that China can test them, reprocess them, package them, and export them. Billions of chips are coming into China from that company. Now, how does that company get all of its equipment that it needs, all of its resources that it needs? From China. So China are just
Yeah.
now saying, well, okay, we're not going to send you any more resources. You can't have any of our rare earth elements. You can't have any of our products. We're not going to do any testing. And 10,000 people in Holland, which is a very small country, 10,000 people are going to lose their jobs because that company will have to close down. That's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot of people. It's already hurting so far. Just a day or two later, it's already hurting the automotive industry in Germany and in Holland. VW comes from that area, Porsche comes from that area, Audi, Mercedes-Benz, they can't get the parts that they need, the components that they need to make their cars, because America has effectively closed down a Chinese source. That's how they work. The idea of, and the ICJ was no different. Once they take you out of the system, you are a nobody. You cease to exist. And this is why I don't have a cloud. Everything I have is stored on one or two of these at home. Everything. I do back up everything that I have, but there's no cloud. I do have an international email address, which you know and you use. And one day, if that ever disappears, I actually have a Chinese email address too.
Yeah.
I should send that to all of my. They can stop me getting on. I don't have Microsoft Word. I have Microsoft Windows, but I don't have Microsoft Word. I don't use PowerPoint. I don't use Word. I don't use any of the Microsoft things. I use LibreOffice because at some stage they will cut me out, or they can cut me out. Not will, might.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that Nexperia company in Netherlands, that's blatant robbery by the Dutch and America. I mean, it's a subsidiary of a Chinese company. I think it's WingTech. But did Netherlands, are they that dumb enough to not realize that Dutch assets are also in China, and China can seize those assets also in retaliation if China wants?
The difference, Ali, is that China probably won't, because this would be illegal. The World Trade Organization has rules. China is a member, and it applies by those rules. So far, China has made no threats. What it will do, almost certainly, some of the big Dutch companies here, the biggest is probably Unilever. It's a huge chemical company where we get our washing powders and things like that. They're huge here, massive. And there's a couple of others. I believe Lipton's Tea. Lipton's Tea is a Dutch company. And this is a strange thing being in China. And I told my wife this the other day. Lipton's Tea is the largest tea provider in China. Now, most Chinese people drink tea, but when they go out and they buy packets of tea or they buy instant coffee, it's through one of Lipton's products. Now, what China will probably do now is to say, let's check these Dutch corporations for compliance. And that is just going to bureaucratically block everything that they do. It's going to hurt. Now, I don't know that China will do that, but China could do that. So go to Unilever, go to Shell, which is huge here as well. There's I think there's 10,000 Shell service stations in China. So go to Shell and then just check all of their compliance issues. And until they're compliant, 100% compliant, and let's be honest, most corporations are not. They're always doing something that is not 100% compliant. China will say, you need to be compliant on this. And until you are, we're closing you down. And then they can say, well, okay, to get compliance, you need to go to this office. That office will say, yeah, you need this, but you also, before you do this, you need that. They can make it extremely difficult to become compliant. And those companies will eventually say, yeah. And it's not China breaking any laws. It's them. But China can make life very difficult for any Dutch corporation. Now, will they? I don't know, but we'll wait and see. Certainly they can, In my opinion, they should. But China is very different. They view things differently. They have different lenses to us. They say, okay, what's going to be best for China? If we were to close 10,000 Shell service stations, there's probably 20 or 30 people working in each one. So there's a lot of people going to lose their jobs. What do we do? How do we change this? How do we make Shell suffer without making the Chinese people suffer? So there may be different things going on. It's certainly not the way that China operates. They won't go out. And you can bookmark this and come back to it and tell me if I'm right or wrong. But in the next 6 months, I bet we will not see a Dutch corporation seized by China. We haven't seen any other country's assets seized by China anytime, anywhere, because that would be non-compliant with World Trade Organization rules. And China follows the rules. Now, this is why I'm confident that people say to me, yeah, but China's done this. Prove it. Western media says China has done this. Now, where's your proof? I don't mean a headline. I mean proof. Where does the proof come from? It comes from a wording inside of a Western media article that says China might, China could, China may, China is able to. All of these are true. China could, China might. But will China? Does China? And the answer, generally speaking, is no. In fact, not generally, every time. I've been able to prove people wrong thousands of times on this. Okay, you said that, but where's your proof? And they show me an article. I say, no, it says in here that they could, or they might, or they may, or they have the ability to. It doesn't say that they're going to, or they have done so. It says interpreting what one Chinese government official has said, interpreting as government policy. It's not government policy at all. So what China might do, what China could do, and what China does do are very different things usually.
Yeah, that's true. China has been an adult in the room so far. But yeah, I mean, I consider this thievery, stealing other countries' resources. And there was very little news in the Dutch media. Even if you try to find it on Google or Bing, there's very little in the newspapers in the Dutch media about this. So not many people knew, but now they're coming to know about it because obviously their job losses of 10,000 to 15,000 people. They were dependent on this Nexperia company.
The interesting thing is the reason it's hitting the news now is because China has said, well, in that case, we're not going to be sending rare earth elements to that Chinese corporation, nor are we going to be servicing their needs because now they're not a Chinese corporation. We're not going to do the job that we've been doing with this Chinese corporation for many years. Now they're saying, look at China being aggressive. Well, what's China done? China has just simply said, well, we no longer own this property, so we're not going to pay the service fees for it. You can do that. That's how it works. So if you want to take over one of China's assets, you take over China's risks and liabilities with it. So the Dutch corporation now has to pay China to do things that China was doing with that corporation. It was part of their business strategy. Now it's not. It's going to become an additional fee. It's going to become a fee for service which China can set. China is quite right to do so. So what are they going to do? Where are they going to get their chips tested? Where are they going to have their chips packaged? Where are they going to get the resources to make their chips? Because China is no longer part of that corporation's business strategy.
Yeah.
That's not China being
that
aggressive.
Tells me, I agree. And that tells me that, I mean, I know Dutch people are not that dumb to act on it rashly and then not realize what the consequences would be, but they were pressured by United States. But again, they could have said no. I mean, surely they would have known the consequences of that happening.
Dutch, it may not be the Dutch facing the Chinese consequences, because when you think about what happens, Philips is a Dutch company as well. They're huge in China. Philips what's it, AMSL, I think it's called, the huge TSML. Manufacturer of chips. Now, they're all using American technology. What happens with American patented technology when America says, if you don't comply with what we want you to do, we are going to withdraw the rights to use our technology? Now, that puts them in a very difficult position, because the moment they say, no, that would be against World Trade Organization rules, America doesn't care. America will just say, that's not our problem, your problem. You have to comply with what we want you to comply with, or the consequences will be, we'll put you out of business. And they will. They'll put them out of business, and then companies like BlackRock will go in and then fire sale buy them. So they become American corporations. This is how the Americans work. This is their strategy. It's a strategy of denial. We stop you from doing something, and their current Deputy Secretary of Defense wrote the book Strategy of Denial. They will say, we're not going to give you something that you absolutely need unless you do something that we want. And that thing that we want is going to destroy the business that you have that we can destroy for you. You're rock and a hard place scenario here. There is no choice for the Dutch. It's probably not the Dutch being bad. It's the Dutch will be on the phone to their Chinese counterparts saying, we don't have a choice. How do we get out of this? What can we do? And there is really no way around this without divesting yourselves of the corporation that you're running and changing its entire structure. I know someone who's had to do that here. Divested himself of his corporation, changed the entire business structure, and the business is now operating again. But he has had to effectively retire from a business that he owned. He owned a business, and the U.S. government sanctioned him. I know this has happened. I know this personally. I've got a friend it's happened to. So you have to, and he was lucky in a sense that his business was small. It had less than 300 employees. You're talking about a business with 100,000 employees around the world. It's not easy. And now they don't even have a Chinese CEO to manage that restructure. They have a Dutch CEO. Phew. Yeah, it's pretty tough times.